Hey y'all, Pugs here with two new reviews for y'all. Today I'm covering As Seen on TV and Can You Spare a Dime? Let me just say I'm sorry to As Seen on TV now because my focus is squarely on my second favorite episode in this entire show. That's right, Can You Spare a Dime is one of my favorite episodes of the over 500 episodes of this show, so you bet your ass I'm excited to talk about it. Especially because that means my favorite is not too far behind. But let's not focus on that now. Let's focus on the two episodes I've got for y'all today. As always, gotta say thank you to everyone who's been watching these videos lately. Some of these have been getting a lot more attention than I expected, which is always exciting. And yeah, let's just get right into it. Our first review of the day is As Seen on TV. I suppose you all have gathered by now from the introduction that out of the two sister episodes I'm covering today, this is not the one all over my radar. But that doesn't necessarily have to mean anything about the quality of the episode itself. This episode could be band geeks, and it would still be overshadowed by my love for Can You Spare a Dime? So that means it's just a coincidence, then, that I think this episode has a fatal flaw. One that I'm, for once, not going to spoil immediately. Let's discuss. I really enjoy the beginning of this episode. I like the surrounding context of the episode, the setup. The Krusty Krab is making a commercial, and that's interesting to me. I always love a good Krusty Krab business practices plot, even though in the end that's not what this episode is about. I think it's nice that Mr. Krabs put Squidward in charge of creating the commercial, at least initially. I wonder how that conversation went down. I like to think that this is yet another entry in the list of Mr. Krabs and Squidward having a relatively long companionship that the earlier episodes especially had going on. Anywho, Mr. Krabs takes over creative control quickly into the episode, and the moment of him firing everyone but the clown was funny. This is also a memorable moment for me, and an understandable decision. I mean, you've got to have a source of levity on the job. Not that I'd ever want a clown around me, though. I'm not scared of them, I just don't like them for a variety of reasons. Moving on, the writers and artists clearly knew what the people wanted on this day, as SpongeBob is absolutely adorable in this first part of the episode, and we get to see one of my favorite SpongeBob faces when he vibrates with excitement over being in the commercial. Also, side note, but y'all know the whole incorrect quote with the scene of SpongeBob's nose sticking out of the ground? You know, the one that's been floating around for years? It should be up on the screen now. People are convinced that Mr. Krabs says, "Please tell me that is your nose." Myself included. I definitely argued incorrectly about this before. I guess you could call this a Mandela effect, but I don't really think it is. Mandela effect implies the absence of the false thing in reality, but like the false screenshot has gone around so much, and I think that's why people have generated the false memory. Memory is really cool like that. And I guess it's true that the Mandela effect can apply to cases where misinformation spreads and changes people's memories, so maybe this isn't a Mandela effect. Okay, well, anyway, there have been a couple funny memes that have come out of this collective false memory, I won't lie. And the moment the moment as it truly exists is also funny. And I guess that's the end of this unstructured tangent. I really don't know what that was, sorry. So, we're then presented with the final commercial, and I love how exquisitely low budget it ends up being. It feels like a parody of local restaurant or store commercials, which I guess is exactly what this commercial is. Bad acting, bad editing, but all charming. SpongeBob's excitement at being in the commercial for even a fraction of a second is palpable and cute, and the detail in that one painting of him pointing at himself is fantastic. Like I always say, though I haven't really stressed this in a bit, this show has amazing visuals and amazing background paintings. But back to discussing the commercial. I love how Pearl was forced into doing it as well. Believe it or not, I relate. I haven't been forced into a commercial by my parents, of course, but I have been asked to help them out with work ventures many times. One last thing I wanted to mention about this commercial is that I love how Mr. Krabs is so cheap that he got a slot at basically the worst time. Like, I don't think an ad at 3:28 in the morning is going to make anyone want to go to your restaurant. Like, why even make the commercial? But that's Mr. Krabs for you. Moving on, it's after we see the commercial that the episode starts to, I won't say take a nosedive, but rather embark on a mild decline. One which will not stop for the rest of the episode. The first issue for me is that first off, seeing SpongeBob get a big head is only entertaining like half the time, and this segment of the episode is not that half. Old Man Jenkins mistaking SpongeBob for a cereal box is pretty funny though, I'll say that. I love how he doesn't even question a box of cereal walking around, even saying "see you later" to it. But once SpongeBob arrives at the Krusty Krab and starts treating everyone like they're his fans, as seen on TV gets a bit dull and nearly boring. Like, I would have been more entertained if I was actually annoyed with SpongeBob, because then I'd have that kind of vindictive kind of feeling keeping me going. But in the end, I wasn't even that. I was just kind of sitting there waiting for the episode to get on with it, you know? And that's not a fun feeling when you're trying to enjoy yourself. Things do pick up significantly when SpongeBob decides to quit his job at the Krusty Krab. The whole scene with Mr. Krabs is hilarious, especially with the snapping at the end. The snapping in the door window was a nice touch that added to the hilarity of the scene. Tom Kenny really went off in this episode, making SpongeBob just sound like an egotistical jerk, and I love it. Mr. Krabs' reaction here is also just utterly hilarious, and I love his face when he first hears SpongeBob's talk. The episode, to its credit, does continue on with this good streak, with this great scene leading it right into Striped Sweater, which is also a funny song, sung equally hilariously. I love how by this point everyone is just completely done with SpongeBob's bullshit. However, that's about the end of the great times for this episode, and we go straight back to the decline once SpongeBob moves into the kitchen. Let me explain. See, my main problem here is that SpongeBob never really learns in the end to drop this crap and go back to the job he actually loves, so it makes the episode feel unfinished. And in the meantime, his failed attempts at appeasing the customers aren't very entertaining to me. The juggling is just boring, though the dramatics of him slipping and dropping the patties on the grill are pretty funny. But seeing him just cook the Krabby Patties as if it was an act just doesn't work quite right. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's a lack of jokes in this segment. And unfortunately, unless they make it look very visually interesting, SpongeBob cooking Krabby Patties on their own isn't all that entertaining for more than a few seconds. And like I said, the episode just ends like that, so it feels almost unfinished. As Seen on TV is a good episode, but it feels like a largely incomplete project. I think this could have been remedied if they cut a bit of SpongeBob acting like everyone is a fan and had a resolution in the end where SpongeBob realizes that this, cooking, is his passion. Mr. Krabs helps this along a little bit, but that last line, while somewhat funny in its irony, would have been better if SpongeBob just genuinely realized that he prefers fry cooking to trying to be a celebrity, But I can definitely see how some people would prefer the episode the way it is, and there's nothing wrong with that. It just doesn't work for me. So this episode is solidly in my good tier, because it's nowhere near bad, but it's not as good as it could have been, which is why I'm putting it in my good tier with a score of 7.5 out of 10. Alright. You see this? You see this episode right here? Can you spare a dime? Yeah, that's my second favorite episode on the show, if you didn't catch that from the introduction. It's that serious. Which means this review is about to be something long as hell. And yeah, I know what y'all are thinking. But Pugs, you already talked for like 7 minutes about episodes you don't even care about. Yeah, I know that. But listen, it's gonna be different this time. So let's get started talking about it. This episode begins with a gorgeous, gorgeous shot of the Krusty Krab, a kind of beauty the likes of the opening shots of Pizza Delivery and Graveyard Shift. As we move into the Krusty Krab, we see that everyone is counting things as the Krusty Krab closes for the night. I really like how this parallelism, I think that's the word to use, was done. Everyone is counting something different, and it's used as establishing character moments for each of them. Mr. Krabs is counting money because he's frugal and money-focused, Squidward is counting his suctions because he's bored and hates his job, and SpongeBob is counting strokes of the mop because he's a hard worker and he finds joy in his job and the small things in general. This actually leads me into a tiny tangent, actually. One thing I like about SpongeBob SquarePants is that because of its episodic nature, you can start anywhere in the show and be fine. But there are definitely some episodes that are better to start with than others, And I'd say that this is one of them because of how it establishes some key character traits of Squidward, SpongeBob, and Mr. Krabs in about 30 seconds. I haven't even thought about this for the newer episodes, so I wonder if they also do this. Or perhaps since the show is so established now, maybe they see no need. I'm not sure. It's an interesting thought. Moving right along, Can You Spare a Dime gets to the plot very quickly, with Mr. Krabs being unable to find his dime and blaming Squidward for stealing it. And in response to the unfounded accusation, Squidward quits his job at the Krusty Krab just as quickly. I love how SpongeBob leaps into action to save Squidward's hat. It's consistent with what we saw in Squidward on Strike, and I also love that he runs after Squidward and tries to get him to come back. This scene is hilarious, especially once SpongeBob pulls that "we're like brothers, only closer" line, because of how random and freaky that visual is. I love how the show just moves on from whatever the hell that was. And SpongeBob is also absolutely adorable with his "what could be better than serving up smiles" line and subsequent face. That's also one of my favorite quotes in the whole show, so that's fun. And Squidward's next line is great as well because I feel that in my bones. Also, the visuals of Squidward's ambitions are hilarious, especially him as a football player. That inspired an edit that I low-key watch at least once a month, which I'll link in the description. Can You Spare a Dime proves that SpongeBob SquarePants is a master of humorous editing, because the abrupt cut to Squidward becoming unhoused and begging for change is just brilliant when being juxtaposed with his belief that the world is his oyster. I know that this joke works on the premise that homelessness is a moral failure, but I'm going to interpret it as Squidward becoming even more aware of the harsh realities of capitalism because this world is my oyster and I can do what I want. And I know none of y'all are here for political analysis, but also maybe you are considering I say something like this at least once a video. Anyway, I love that SpongeBob continues to show him compassion during this difficult time because the sponge is just so full of love and care. He even lets Squidward stay with him to absolutely humorous results. But before I get there, I also wanted to say that I love that even after coming across Squidward, who's covered in dirt and living in a box, SpongeBob still believes that Squidward has the capacity to achieve his dreams, so I thought that was pretty cute. SpongeBob is a very good host, and you can kind of tell what's about to happen once he gives Squidward breakfast in bed. This episode is like Welcome to the Chum Bucket done far, far better, because Squidward's change is more gradual and unambiguous and simply funnier, because in the end it's SpongeBob who gets fed up. The montage of SpongeBob taking care of Squidward is great and has some funny moments, such as when SpongeBob spins his own face, and SpongeBob's ending successful face is so adorable, like, I can't. I also really love the track that plays in this scene, Breakthrough. This is also the only time that this track plays in the show. A shame. I think it fits the vibe. We get a cameo, or not even a cameo, he's somewhat a supporting character, of my fave, Gary, in this episode, and this is when Can You Spare a Dime takes a turn. That sounded ominous. It's not supposed to be, I promise. SpongeBob is forced to go up and down the stairs to serve Squidward's needs, and I thought the voices paired with the shot of SpongeBob's pineapple was pretty clever. I bet it was a great way to save on time and possibly even money on animation. I don't know much about how the industry works, but I guess at this point the show was successful enough that perhaps I shouldn't praise scrimping. I don't know. Anyone more knowledgeable about animation production than me, feel free to chime in. I love how as Squidward gets worse and worse, even the narrator gets in on the pure sass that Gary exudes in this sequence. The new narrator part is so funny and gets me laughing every time. We watch as SpongeBob becomes increasingly tired of Squidward, and I love the shot of SpongeBob going down the hallway with Squidward's lemonade. Like, it feels like it was very purposefully done that the hallway is so long, and it feels like SpongeBob is traversing something very long to get to Squidward, like this is a trial and tribulation, hard labor, something harrowing. It's very clever, I'd say. Also, I just noticed this while looking at the picture I chose for this part of the review, but like, why is there a picture of Squidward on the wall? A symptom of Squidward taking over SpongeBob's space? Or SpongeBob's adoration of Squidward? Interesting little detail there. Anyway, this is where my favorite sequence of the episode begins, and from here to the end of the episode, Can You Spare a Dime is just a collection of absolute amazingness that cements this episode as my number 2. SpongeBob is so fed up with Squidward, and passive aggressiveness seeps through his every pore. Once again, Tom Kenny does a great job voicing SpongeBob and his frustration here. I love how SpongeBob first tries to bluntly yet subtly tell Squidward what he wants him to do, like with the soup or the TV, but of course Squidward's far too self-absorbed to heed those signs. The delivery on when I need a job done, I get someone with a job to do that job is just immaculate and gets me rolling every time. The visuals are also just so good. Like, SpongeBob is completely over it, and we, the audience, are with him. I told y'all at some point that I love when SpongeBob is completely over it, and it leads to some of the funniest moments in the series, and this is one of them. And Can You Spare a Dime doesn't let up at all, because when Squidward challenges SpongeBob once more, and SpongeBob screams and essentially goes Super Saiyan, he barges into Mr. Krabs' office with impunity and starts throwing dimes at him just to get him to hire Squidward back. And when Mr. Krabs denies him, we get one of my absolute favorite moments in the entire show, SpongeBob literally choking Mr. Krabs out while he yells at him. It's hilarious, and the line delivery here is some of the best there is. I love that SpongeBob immediately pacifies upon seeing the ancient dime, and I love that he wins with Mr. Krabs hiring Squidward back. Of course, we all know the poor guy doesn't win for long, because Mr. Krabs and Squidward get into it at the end of the episode, and SpongeBob silently puts the maid costume back on, leaving for a humorous ending. Well then, that was a long review. Let's sum it all up. As I've said over and over and over again, I love this episode. Definitely in my amazing tier. Definitely in the high end of my amazing tier. So I suppose now the question is, what score am I going to give this episode? Well, it won't be a 10 out of 10. And let me explain why. This episode is simply perfect, there is no doubt. But there can only be one 10 out of 10 episode in my rating system. And if Can You Spare a Dime is only my second favorite, then obviously this episode cannot be that 10 out of 10. That's why Can You Spare a Dime is entering my amazing tier with a score of 9.9 out of 10, cementing its place as my second favorite episode of the entire show. As always, I'll be ending this review with some closing thoughts of mine. As I write this script, I nearly dread to think how long the video is going to be. The amount of photos I'm going to have to add for the Can You Spare a Dime section is going to be insane. Or it was insane. I write the scripts before I make the visuals, but I record after making the visuals, so making statements like this is hard. Anyway, it was totally worth it because there's nothing I love more than raving about something I love. And I really think that Can You Spare a Dime has it all. It has humor, it has character dynamics, it has peak line deliveries, it has anything and everything you can think of. I feel bad, because clearly As Seen on TV is being overshadowed even in the closing thoughts. But there's really not much I can say about that one. I do think it's interesting that these two episodes have SpongeBob acting in a way that is atypical of him. Not out of character, to be clear, because SpongeBob does have an established egotistical side, and he does get pissed off when pushed hard enough. But both of these episodes have SpongeBob acting in a different way as an important plot point. I stated this not too long ago in my review of Nasty Patty and Idiot Box, but I like when sister episodes have little connections between them like this. It helps make the entire 22 minutes, roughly, feel more cohesive. And it's also just neat from a reviewing standpoint. As far as I can tell, though, I think sister episodes are usually randomly determined. Is that true? I know some are, like, made together, but I feel like I read that somewhere, and I truly do not have time to go do an in-depth fact check. Okay, I've talked a lot. I think I'm gonna finally stop now. Stay safe and healthy, y'all, and I'll see y'all in the next review.